All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I am the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are 50 years old as of November of last year, and we have been very proud to serve trans people for our entire 50 years as language has evolved and as our understandings of gender and queerness and feminism have evolved. We have 4 trans support groups here at Charis. We are in the process of developing a 5th one. We're very grateful, to all the folks who are in this room that we know who do this work in various ways. And we are really, really, really excited to welcome all of you here today for Trans Kids Are Kids, stories and resources from the front lines of the movement for transgender youth. This is a panel discussion featuring Alexis Stratton, Adam Polaski, Liz Williams, and more. And then we're going to introduce who else is here because we got some new folks, which is great. We have some contributors from the book. These folks are from the Campaign for Southern Equality and as well, Georgia Equality as well. Noelle is from Georgia Equality, and they'll introduce themselves and talk about Georgia Equality. When people are sort of in distress, we hold up the Campaign for Southern Equality. And we're like, yes, and look at this amazing work. We talk a lot about what it means to be able to bloom where you're planted, what it means for Southerners to get to stay in the South. It's really important to me as a Georgian that we support our kids that want to stay in Georgia and be trans and gender nonconforming in Georgia and not have to leave our public schools. Or if we do have to leave our public schools for a little while, which may be happening, that we don't have to leave our public spaces, right? I don't want our kids disappeared from public life in this moment. It's important that we take up space in our religious spaces, in our public life, in all the ways that we always have, and that our families get the resources that they need. And the Campaign for Southern Equality has been a huge part of that. And Georgia Equality has been a huge part of that. Georgia Equality's advocacy has kept so many bills from passing. Sometimes people are like, oh, I can't believe another bill has passed, and it's so dispiriting. But y'all, the number of bills that don't pass because of the work of Georgia Equality, it's truly inspiring. And that work is so hard and so long. And, as soon as the legislative session just ended here, and they're already prepping for next year, right? Because we know what bills are coming down the pike. So I am truly grateful as someone who doesn't want to punch people out and get arrested, that other people are doing that work in the Gold Dome. I can do it about once a year, and that's it. So it takes a special kind of spirit to be able to do that work. So we're glad to have people with that spirit here in the space. So we're going to have some readings and some discussion and then open it up for questions. So I'm going to kick it over to y'all and just say welcome and thank you all so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and for folks who are online. We're so glad to have you here. My name is Alexis Stratton. I'm one of the co-authors of Trans Kids Our Kids, and I'm also a grant writer for several LGBTQ+ organizations across the United States and especially in the South. And I'm just so honored to be here today with you and with our guests and with my colleagues to talk about this book and to talk about what's happening for trans youth and their families right now and what we can do. So I'm going to start with a reading from our book, Trans Kids Are Kids. And it tells the story of a family in Oklahoma trying to navigate negative legislation there, anti-LGBTQ+ legislation there. And then we feature a family who is here with us today, who is in Alabama. So I'll do a reading. It'll be about 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up for a panel discussion. We'll chat with you, and then we will open up the floor for Q&A. So there will be plenty of time to discuss, share resources, etc. So here we go. When LJ's youngest child, Aaron, was a toddler, LJ, who is a member of a Native nation, wondered if Aaron might grow up to be gender expansive. Though Aaron was assigned female at birth, from a very young age, he told his parents he was a he. My boy has always been a boy, says LJ, who uses they and she pronouns. LJ tells the story of when Aaron first told them exactly who he was. When Aaron was 3, he and his dad were standing outside, watching Aaron's older siblings get on a school bus. "One day you'll be on a bus," Aaron's dad said. "What do you think about that?" "I don't know if I would like it," Aaron answered. Aaron's dad was surprised. "Why not?" he asked. "Is the bus too big? You think it'll go too fast?" Aaron shook his head. "I don't think the boys will like me." "Why don't you think the boys will like you?" "Because I don't think they'll think I'm a real boy." Aaron's dad took a deep breath. "I can see how that would make you not want to ride a bus," he said. "But I don't think that'll happen, you know? I think you'll have a bus driver that'll make sure you'll be okay." When LJ and their spouse talked about this later, one of LJ's first thoughts was, how is he so small and he's got these big feelings of not being accepted? Aaron had also been calling himself he instead of she for months. LJ, who is two-spirit and indigiqueer, said that her tribe believes children come from the stars and they choose us. So now we've got to take our cue from them, she says. So LJ and her spouse did. They started using he and him pronouns with Aaron. They told their families about what was going on. When one of Aaron's grandfathers met the news with a gentle, "Oh, okay," LJ felt like, we can do this. That was me, sorry. It's a very, very active mic. By the time Aaron entered pre-kindergarten at a local public school, he was a boy like any other boy. But Aaron and his family live in rural Oklahoma, in a 2-stoplight town with a grocery store, a Dollar General, and not much else. It was only a matter of time before the state's anti-trans policies began impacting the family. In Aaron's first year of school in 2021, everything seemed like it might be okay. The principal was supportive and discreet, and Aaron's teacher had taught a gender-diverse child at a previous school. But in 2022, a bathroom ban passed in Oklahoma that required students to use restrooms that aligned with their sex on their birth certificates. Students who declined to use such bathrooms had to use a single occupancy restroom or changing room provided by the school. If a school district failed to comply, they risked a percentage of their state funding getting cut, and they could also be sued by parents. That fall, Aaron started kindergarten. The nearest single occupancy bathroom was on the other side of the school. LJ was concerned. What if he's worried about peeing on himself and he wants to go to the closest bathroom? She asked at the time. What if he gets caught? While the principal said that the school wasn't going to punish Aaron, LJ believed that it was just stupid that we had to think through this. Fortunately, by the start of the next school year in 2023, the school had moved Aaron's classroom closer to a single occupancy restroom. Despite this, Aaron still doesn't always understand why he can't just use the boys' restroom. As new discriminatory laws come down the pipeline, LJ worries how they'll stay on top of them and protect Aaron's privacy, autonomy, and identity. There's so much, and you're just trying to do right by your children, they say. Sorry, my note thing fell out. Okay, I got it. I'm back, y'all. I'm back. Thank you all for your patience. I can do this. So went to the wrong page. It's not gonna be all right. It's really gonna be fun. Yes. We're in this together in all things. One of the most important tools for advocating against anti-LGBTQ plus laws can be the media. The more that people can see transgender people for who they really are, happy, thriving, and not the false caricatures frequently painted by conservatives, the greater the chances of acceptance and ultimately success for the LGBTQ plus movement in this country. An excellent example of media-savvy trans advocates are Harley and her father, Jeff. They're from Auburn, Alabama, and for the most part live relatively ordinary lives. They like to have cookouts. Jeff likes to take the family out on the lake in his little boat. And every December, they decorate their house with Christmas lights so extravagant that the whole town comes to see them. When you look us up on the internet now, you find two things: advocacy stuff and all the Christmas lights. Jeff laughs. But getting involved in advocacy was accidental. In 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the family began joining virtual meetings through their local PFLAG chapter. It was a positive environment with lots of resources and people sharing stories about their journey, including Harley's exposure to extreme bullying that resulted in her family pulling her from school in 6th grade and enrolling her in virtual classes for a year. During one meeting in 2021, the regional director of PFLAG asked if any families in Alabama would be interested in sharing their story with the media in response to the proposed ban on gender-affirming care in the state. Harley and Jeff agreed to do it. We said, maybe we should try it and let's see what it's like, Jeff recalls. It was like a father-daughter bonding thing. They ended up being interviewed by the BBC, which left Harley and Jeff feeling empowered. We found that we were... We got a system now. We found that we were capable of doing it, Jeff says. And we know that not everyone can do media or feels safe enough to do it. So we decided that we would be okay with putting ourselves out there. I'm privileged to have such a supportive family being trans, Harley adds. So I wanted to take the opportunity to advocate for trans kids because we need those voices right now. Jeff now serves as the vice president of his local PFLAG chapter, and he and Harley are proud to help families of trans youth living in Alabama and other states. For example, when the healthcare ban was proposed in Alabama in 2021, Harley and Jeff spoke out repeatedly, sharing virtual testimony against the ban and lobbying as much as possible in person. They spent Harley's spring break in Montgomery speaking with legislators, including the governor's chief health advisor. Harley had been receiving medical care for several years by then, and if the ban passed and took effect, the family would be put on an especially challenging spot, as Harley's brother, one of Harley's biggest cheerleaders, Jeff says, was midway through a 6-year term with the Alabama National Guard. The healthcare ban was forcing the family to choose between two terrible options: stay in Alabama to be close to their son at the expense of Harley's healthcare, or move elsewhere to continue Harley's care but split up the family in the process. When the law passed, they joined a lawsuit against it as plaintiffs. Their advocacy journey has continued beyond Alabama. In 2023, Harley became the youngest person to testify before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee when she shared her story as part of calling for the passage of the Equality Act, which would ensure inclusive non-discrimination protections at the federal level. It was awe-inspiring to watch her do that, Jeff recalls with pride. During the hearing, Harley, wearing a gray Madras blazer and a gold heart locket around her neck, spoke about coming out as a young trans person and experiencing bullying by her peers, as well as her state government. I love my life. I love my family. I love my friends. And I am happy, she said. I'm asking for you to help us stop certain people from using the transgender community as a political pawn. Please stop attacking our lives for votes or money. These are human rights hanging in the balance. Help us communicate that they are impacting people's lives and our pursuit of happiness. We are just like your kids, just like your neighbors, and you. We also deserve the ability to be happy. The public visibility has also led to some tensions in the family's day-to-day life. In Alabama, there is a law in effect prohibiting trans students from using the restroom that aligns with their gender identity. Even though the sponsor of the bill said that he didn't expect anyone to actually enforce the law, a parent wound up calling Harley's school to complain about her using the girls' restroom. The school told Harley that she couldn't use the girls' restroom anymore, and since she did not feel safe using the boys' bathroom, she now largely avoids using the restroom at all while at school. Harley has a little over a year left in high school. It's less now. And then Jeff expects that she will likely leave the state. Spoiler, she is. That's sad for the family. Jeff's office is decked out in gear from Auburn University, Auburn pennants, crests, and rally towels, along with blue and orange pom-poms. We live 5 miles from one of the best colleges in the state, Jeff says, but she cannot go to school in the state. And honestly, she has no reason to ever come back. Which is what they want. They don't want the LGBTQ plus community in this state. Do I want to move? No, Harley says. This is where I grew up. I've lived here all my life. Having to leave all that behind because of some fear-mongering politics, it's so unnecessary. Harley does not know where the next few years will take her, but she does know one thing for sure. Even if I move out of Alabama, I'm not going to stop advocating for people in Alabama or anywhere in the country. In April 2024, LJ received a message saying that Aaron had used the word sex at school and that LJ ought to know about it. Aaron had brought a book to school called I Am Pusheen the Cat by Claire Belton. The book is about a cute cartoon cat named Pusheen, and on the back of the book, some of Pusheen's characteristics are listed: name, birthday, hobbies, her favorite word, meow, as well as Pusheen's dream, to make friends all over the world. The book also lists Pusheen's sex, female. It didn't list Pusheen's pronouns, LJ says with a laugh. Aaron's teacher contacted LJ to let her know that some of Aaron's classmates had been talking about the word sex, and they had traced it back to Aaron. LJ asked Aaron about this. Where does it say sex in the book? LJ asked. And then I was like, right, as a biological term. I asked my kid, how did you feel when this happened? And my kid was like, I felt embarrassed because I had to put my book away. LJ says they can hold space in this political climate for the teacher who may have been afraid of repercussions in what LJ calls a tar and feather environment. But they also want to find a way forward. Let's see how we can both learn here and find a solution that's just, she says. For now, LJ continues working to find that way forward in a state where every day more policies impacting her child are emerging. LJ doesn't want to move unless they need to. The only thing that will actually get us to uproot is if my babies can't get the support they need, they share. This is the new motherland for me and my generation. I'm rooted in the folks who suffered to be here. We made a relationship to this land. In the meantime, LJ and their spouse continue to create spaces where their kids can be themselves, regardless of their gender. We all got manicures at Christmas, and I was thinking the little boys would get toes, but no, they wanted their fingers done too. And they were bright, like Christmas colors, LJ says. She was a little apprehensive about how Aaron and his brother's friends would react. We asked them, and they were like, my friends thought it was the coolest. And that's what they continuously help us heal from, the colonialist norms. They remind us and teach us and guide us and show us. And I have no choice but to carry hope. Thank you. So now I am delighted to open up this conversation together about the book and about trans youth and what they're experiencing in Georgia and across the country. So I'd love to take a moment for everyone in the panel to introduce themselves, name, pronoun, what brings you here today. So I'll start over on that end. Sitting on one. It was Liz the whole time.
Thank you. My name is Liz Williams. I use the pronoun she, they, and I am the director of Southern Equality Studios, which is the art program of Campaign for Southern Equality. And I was the designer of the cover of the book, As Kids Are Kids.
Sorry, my name is Adam Polaski. I have a stutter, so this mic is going to pick up every little little piece of it. So I use he, him. I am the communications and political director at the Campaign for Southern Equality. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm one of the co-authors of the book.
Hey everyone, my name is Noelle Heatherland. I feel most affirmed by they, them pronouns. I am the statewide organizing and outreach manager for Georgia Equality. I'm based here in Atlanta, and I'm grateful to be here representing our work at Georgia Equality. Thanks for having me.
Hello. There we go. Hi, my name is Harley Walker. I'm from Auburn, Alabama. I'm part of the story that was just read earlier. I guess I would consider myself an LGBTQ youth advocate. I work with organizations like PFLAG and HRC to just kind of share my story as a transgender person and, shed light to the trans community that faces so much misinformation in the world.
Hey, I'm Jeff Walker, he, him, and also from Auburn, Alabama. And I'm the parent of a trans teen, so from the story. And have been active with PFLAG at HRC over the past 4 or 5 years in our effort to just try to bring visibility and an understanding to what it means to be a parent or a youth in this environment, especially in the South.
So I'd love to start by setting the scene about why we wrote this book, generally speaking, and the national situation as it stands right now. We'll get into some more details about the actual process of the book, but we wrote the book in early 2024, between January and April, and really took a snapshot of what the world was like at that moment for trans youth and their families. As we know, it has gotten worse. In 2024 alone, according to the ACLU, 535 anti-LGBTQ plus bills were proposed across the United States. In 2025 already, the number I think is 569 or higher. And so these numbers keep rising exponentially. So if you track from the late 2010s up through the 2020s, it's just like shoots up in an exponential line. And these bills have just been coming at us fast and in wave after wave after wave. And so we knew the situation on the ground at Campaign for Southern Equality, and we just really wanted to share the stories about it. So I'm curious, I guess I go to Adam and also Noelle, like what is the situation like now nationally for LGBTQ plus youth and trans youth in particular? And we'll move in a minute to talk about Georgia specifically.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about it from a federal, or sorry, the past few years have really been marked by this wave of terrible legislation. We've seen almost every state where it's politically viable, which is like 20 or 30 states now, have passed these anti-transgender student athlete bills or anti-transgender healthcare bills, and they're all attacking kids, right? They're all attacking people under 18. And sort of, I've been in politics for like 15 or so years, and I've been a student of it before that. I've never seen anything like this. That's just unprecedented, unanimous, like shoving through of the same carbon copy bill. They just copy and paste it and push it in every single state. And now I think what's really scary is we're seeing at the federal level this again kind of copy paste, but it's worse because it's from the federal government. And so I think we're seeing just like a pretty small population get scapegoated for and like basically used for like political points, like you said in the book, Harley. And it's not just a political game. Like there are real consequences. Folks are having to travel sometimes hours and spend hundreds or thousands of dollars just to access their health care, which they you have to do 2 or 3 times a year. Folks are not able to like play on a basketball team with their school and feel like the only kid in the whole state who can't do this one thing. So I don't know. It's felt really. I think there are the types of laws that like don't really do anything. They're like sort of these symbolic, terrible things, but like I think the difference with these laws is they really do something. They really impact people's lives. They really rip families apart. And it's I think it's a heartbreaking thing to watch. But I'd love to hear what's happening here in Georgia. I know y'all just finished your session.
Yeah, so for anyone not familiar, Georgia Equality is the state of Georgia's oldest and largest LGBTQ advocacy organization for our state. We amazingly defeated in the 2024 legislative session, which our session here in Georgia runs from January to April, beginning of April, end of March time. Last year, we defeated about 20 pieces of anti-LGBTQ legislation, which is amazing. However, as has already been referenced, the national climate is just continuing to shift in a more hostile direction. And we definitely feel the wave of hate coming down from the federal level into the state capitol. And it really emboldens folks from where they already were to feel empowered to get to the next level with their hateful agendas. And so this past session, we had losses and we had wins. It was a mixed bag. We've seen blue states, northern states already have a what is often referred to as a sports ban, which is an exclusionary piece of legislation to keep trans kids from being able to play sports with their peers. They did finally pass that here in Georgia this year. We're heartbroken over that. We are planning to have a press conference to take a stand against the governor signing it, likely on Monday. For anyone interested in attending that, I can provide more information afterwards. But so we have that on the table. We also saw, and some folks might think, well, how does this apply to youth? Because what I'm about to state is a bill that was passed regarding adult age folks who are in our jails and prisons not being able to access health care. And the thing is that kids see this, they hear that. And so even though you might not say immediately there's a direct correlation, there's certainly an impact when you're part of a community and you see the folks that are in your community not having access to their health care if they happen to be incarcerated, unlike other folks who may be incarcerated next to them. So that is going to affect approximately 5 folks here in the state of Georgia. And we anticipate that there will be lawsuits to fight that legislation. And then we also saw SB 36 pass, which is something that Georgia Equality, along with other partner orgs, had defeated for well over a decade, 11 years. It was kept from passing. This year it did pass. And so that bill is known as RFRA. It's the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It sounds maybe nice on the surface to some folks, but really it's setting up a license to use whatever someone's faith is as a way to discriminate. And the thing is, it won't just impact trans kids, but we know that trans people are an intended target for that bill, but it will also impact other people in other communities as well. And thankfully, we again anticipate that we'll see litigation coming out once that bill unfortunately becomes law. We did defeat a puberty blocker ban. At the beginning of the session, our executive director, along with the rest of our staff, we really set protecting healthcare as our number one priority. And so we did see that bill thanks to a lot of parent advocates and trans people that joined us at the Capitol, contacted their legislators. We saw that bill not only get amended in the process to become a better version, a less harmful version of the bill, it did get stalled. So we're grateful that that did not advance. There was also a bill, SB 39, which was to ban gender affirming healthcare for all ages, including adults on any state employee health plan for anyone who works for the state of Georgia, and that and also for folks on our Medicaid plans. And that also was put to rest. We do know, however, that those bills will likely resurface in the next session. So I'm really glad we're having this panel to talk about what's going on so we can be prepared.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that and for all of your amazing work. We'll talk about this on installation in a minute. It does have a mind of its own sometimes, so be not afraid when it starts to fall down. It's just got a lot of joy and wants to share it. So what is the situation like right now for y'all in Alabama? How are all of these bills and policies and executive orders impacting y'all?
So I would say Alabama's been kind of a practice ground for a lot of the other states, right? We were some of the very first laws. So we saw them practice until I guess they felt like they got it perfect. For us in Alabama, the gender healthcare ban went into effect finally. Well, it was finally voted in by the legislature, and then immediately, as we mentioned in the book, we fought it in the courts. What's interesting, there was a conservative judge that it went for in the very beginning who put an injunction against it, and there was a sentence in that judgment that I think it really hit home with me, and now they're completely ignoring it. Right, that judge said that healthcare ought to be the decision of parents, doctors, and children, right, that are getting that care, and that he fully supported that. But that has since gone into effect in Alabama. So we're one of the families actually that are now displaced. The doctors that Harley had been with since the very beginning of her journey. And I say a lot when I talk about this, I wish all healthcare in America looked like the healthcare that Harley got from the doctors that we went to. They knew Harley. They cared about Harley. They really talked with her and worked with her during the pandemic when we had to do telehealth with them, right? They would see patients 8, 9 o'clock at night, right, out of their own time, asking her how school was going, just really spending time to understand who she was as a patient and make sure the healthcare they were giving was great. So now we actually have had to change, and we have to travel out of state for healthcare now, which we're able to do, but I know a lot of families aren't, and I'm thankful for like the Campaign for Southern Equality, who helps with families be able to do that. This year in Alabama has been continually bad too, right? As we mentioned in the book, last year the bathroom ban. It was a bill that when it passed, I was at the house and I talked to the gentleman that had proposed it, and he shook my hand and looked me in the eyes and said, "You know, we're doing this. It was an election year. We're doing this, and I never intend for it to be enforced." And I get what he was saying, right? He's doing that. He won political points and he got reelected. But what happened, and a lot like what you mentioned, Noel, is people felt emboldened then, right? They know those bills passed. They're in the news. They're in the media. So last year, because of some things, Harley had gotten accolades in the community, really lifting up some of her accomplishments. A parent called the school and complained. We don't really know if that parent even had a kid at the school, that she was using the girls' restroom. So we got called in and had to change that. Well, this year there was a new bill that even when it was pre-filed, so before the first day of our legislature this year, around field trips that students may take that might become overnight trips. And so Harley competes on the debate team and they do overnight trips. So very early on, the school really got ahead of it and said, we're afraid of the backlash from this before it even goes into debate on the legislature floor. And so we've had to deal with that as well. It continues to be a battleground. I know next week is our last week. And I was looking, when we were waiting to come in, there are 3 more anti-LGBTQ bills on the docket to try to get through by the end of this year. Obviously, those will be signed if they do get through, because our governor will sign those very quickly. So it's tough. It's tough to be in Alabama to see the attacks directly on your kid and how it impacts us as a family, right? And other families like ours. So it's really hard.
I think, especially for me, like you said, there's been so much anti-LGBTQ legislation, and from Alabama, we were one of the first states to do it. So back in the pandemic in 2020, 2021, Alabama starts introducing this legislation. And before that, I always like to tell people what it was like kind of before that. There was so much progress for LGBTQ equality. And a lot of people didn't really know what being transgender meant or who transgender people were, because, we are such a small portion of the US population. And so once all these bills passed, it was such a 180. And I went from, just living my life as like a teenage girl in Auburn, Alabama to, advocating like I am now. And, while it's been the most incredible opportunity I've been able to have, it sucks that I even have to do this. And, I just want to, go watch movies with my friends or worry about high school, and do typical teenage things. And so, it's been definitely a big change for us. And like Adam mentioned earlier, having lawmakers use you and your community to be able to win elections, use you as a political pawn, has been so dehumanizing. And I always say, if you're elected to represent all of your constituents, why are you passing legislation that directly harms the lives of your constituents? And so it's been a real change for me, and it's really sad to see. And like, it's made me leave the state for college. And I hate to do that, but it's a situation I've been forced to do. And so I just think that a lot of it is unnecessary, and it's changed my life, everyday life. Like he said, in school, with the bathroom ban passing, our school only had one gender neutral bathroom all the way on the first floor in the library. And so if I was on the 3rd floor on the very far side of the building, and I have to walk all the way downstairs to go to the bathroom, after that bill was passed. And luckily, we were able to advocate and get more gender neutral bathrooms in our school. However, a lot of schools aren't like that, or a lot of schools don't even have any that are open to students. And like you said, with the debate trips, I love debate. It's one of my favorite things to do in high school. I have such a great support system there. None of my teammates are, worried about me sharing a room with them on these field trips. No, like, it's literally, we're so tired after a day of debating that we get back to the hotel room and immediately go to sleep and then wake up and do the same thing the next day. So it's such a non-issue And it's so frustrating. And so that's why I do what I do, to try to, share my story and share that, I'm just like any other teenage girl. And, we shouldn't be targeted simply because of our identity. I think that's something that gets lost a lot of the time.
Thank you so much for that, both of you. And, we were so honored to be able to capture y'all's stories in the book and talk to so many trans youth and their families across the U.S. I'd love to tell you a little bit about how the book happened. It's kind of a wild story. I will say, I got my master's in creative writing. I graduated in 2012. And since then, I've been trying to send out this novel into the world and send it to agents and get it published. And I was always told it's just such a long road to get a book published. It's such a long road. Publishers and agents, they just take so long. So I was like, okay, whatever. So this book was a very different story. In October 2023, IG Publishing, who published our book, Robert Lasner, who is the head of it, he sent an email to Jasmine Beach Ferrara, who's one of our co-authors and also the executive director of Campaign for Southern Equality. He had seen an article in the New Yorker about the Campaign for Southern Equality's work for Transgender Youth, our Trans Youth Emergency Project. And he emailed Jasmine and was like, this is a really important story. Like, I really want these stories about trans youth and their families to be heard. Do you know anyone who could write a book? And Jasmine said, boy, do I. So Jasmine also has an MFA in creative writing. Adam is the director of our communications program at Campaign for Southern Equality, and I had been writing grants for CSE since 2018, and so was very familiar with their work and with the landscape. And so Jasmine put together this dream team. We pulled in some more staff members, including Liz and Carolyn Jones, who works in the Trans Youth Emergency Project, to help us edit and help us brainstorm and be thought partners. And in December, when I joined the team, Jasmine was like, they want to know when you think you could have this book done by. And I was like, oh, I did the math in my head. And I was like, I think we could have a draft done by August 2024. And then a few days later, she emailed back and said, how about April? And so it was December 2023. In December 2023, Alexis was very sure of themselves and was super confident, like super Alexis. And I was like, oh yeah, tell Robert, we can totally do that. And so we started the project in earnest in late January 2024. Between late January 2024 and April 15th, we interviewed 50 people in 19 different states and wrote a 65,000 word book, sent it off to the publisher like almost at midnight on April 15th. I delayed sending in my taxes that year. I asked for an extension. I submitted in October. And it was out to the publisher, and we had a proofing process, and Liz was in the process of making our cover, and all that got solidified. It went to print in July and came out in September. The main reason that Robert at IG Publishing wanted it to come out in September and not to delay the way that I wanted it to was because of the election. None of us had any grandiose ideas that we would sway the electorate to support trans youth. But if we could change a heart or a mind, if we could help trans youth and their families know that they were supported and loved as soon as possible, we wanted to do that. And something that Adam often shares is that we needed to tell these stories now. I don't know if you would want to add on that about why we needed to tell those stories right now.
Yeah, sure. So we often, right, I think of this as sort of like almost like a first draft of history, right? And it felt really important to collect the stories in pseudo real time. So instead of catching up with folks 2 or 3 or 5 years after the bills have passed and been the law of the land for a while, we wanted to really capture what was happening and how that shift happens. It's really interesting what you shared about prior to 2021, things were sort of just like normal and fine. We heard that from a lot of folks, and that was fresh in their memory. I think one of the anxieties I have about this current wave of politics is like that we just become a country where in some states you just can't do things, and we like become complacent in that. And I think we should never become complacent in that. We should always be aware that this is like not a normal thing. It is not normal for 25 states to pass the same exact bill within 2 years of itself. It's not normal for people to have to travel to get an abortion. It's not normal for people to have to travel to get their kid the healthcare that 2 years ago they could just get by going down the street. So I think I think being able to capture that in real time helped us actually tell the story and not have folks just like kind of be not complacent necessarily, but adjust to this kind of new reality that we're living in.
Liz, I would wonder, I'd love to move to you and ask, what drew you to this project? Why did you say yes when Jackson was like, come help these wild writers get this manuscript done in a few months? And what moved you to say yes to making the cover?
Well, usually whenever Jasmine has an idea, the curious part of me is always like, how can we make this work? And especially if it's incorporating art, I'm always down to help. I mean, that would be really awkward if I'm working for the art program. I'm like, no thanks. I don't get it. But yeah, especially, I mean, these two brilliant folks who are working to uplift and amplify how bizarre and absurd and horrific these times are. Like, if I can help support in any way, of course I'm going to do that. And yeah, I was just excited to have an opportunity to use art as a means to hopefully have this book spread a little bit more, because I know that there's so much importance in art. So yeah, I was really honored to be invited to be a part of this project.
Thanks, Liz. Adam, why did you say yes when Jasmine called in late 2023?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm sorry. CSC had been doing this project called the Trans Youth Emergency Project, where we provide travel grants and like navigation support to help people identify care out of state, and then travel there. And so that project has been, I think, a real like bright spot for us of being able to say that, okay, yes, this is terrible, and also we can find a way around this, and people are going to help you do it. We've had amazing experiences with the donor community has really, come out, and it's like small grassroots dollars. It's people doing lemonade stands. It's people hosting book sales and book events and art projects. So I think seeing that project be impactful, and talking to the parents and families who were served by it, it just felt like the kind of thing where you're hearing these logistical challenges, and they're so, in some ways, mundane. Of like, how many people have like had a flight delay? Yeah, it sucks. But then when your flight delay forces you to be late for your appointment, or like cause complications with accessing your healthcare that you shouldn't even have to fly to. It felt like the kind of thing we wanted to capture. And so I think for me, I felt equal parts like heartbroken and like pissed off about these laws. And I thought that if folks could hear some of these stories and see how challenging it is, at least they would think twice. At least they would think twice about just kind of allowing the law to pass and then not really considering the human impact of it. So I felt, super honored to be able to be a witness and a scribe in this. I'm a better writer than I am a speaker, so it felt like this kind of experience and important opportunity to be able to capture folks' stories, put them in a book, that I think is like kind of the best way to understand what's happening. Is you have to see 50 experiences from 19 states. You have to see the mosaic of stories, and you get a little snippet from each person and each experience, and they add up to this like super unjust, view of what's happening.
I will add, similarly to Liz, when Jasmine asks us to do something or asks me to do something, I want to say yes, because it's always a good idea or a wild ride or something. And it's really lovely to see a team come around and do that. And then also, I'm a non-binary person, so this impacts me. I have a non-binary spouse and I have a non-binary kiddo. So I wanted to be part of capturing and telling stories and sharing stories that might make the world a better, safer, more welcoming and affirming place for my kiddo when they grow up, no matter how they end up identifying. And so I think it's important to do that narrative shift work, that storytelling work, in hopes that we might get some more empathy and compassion as we go. Why did y'all say yes when Adam reached out about being part of this project?
Like I said earlier, I feel like, coming from a privileged place, having such a supportive family, being transgender, I feel like since these laws have been passed, it's almost my call to action to do anything I can to be able to share my story and help our community, because it needs it so desperately right now, and there's not enough of those voices because people are scared, and justly so. There's so much fear mongering and there's so much hate. And so I think embracing storytelling and being able to share my story helps people realize that trans people are humans and that, we aren't hurting anybody. And so any chance I get to be able to share my story and, shed a light on how much joy trans people have, I take. And so that's really why I did it. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think similarly with Harley, I think when we have an opportunity to shed a light on, we're just a regular family from a small town in Alabama. We're your neighbors, we're your friends, we're your coworkers. We have the same problems you have, the same issues you have, and I just so happen to have a transgender daughter who has these additional issues now because of this rhetoric and this targeting, and being able to share our story. I think it's been really important to talk about decisions. When you watch movies and you see a family that's going through something and they're all sitting around the dinner table and it's this heartbreaking moment in a movie. We had those conversations when we were trying to decide if this law passes, which parent is going to go with which child and which parent is going to go with the other child to ensure that they have the support system that they need every day. As our son was, kind of coming into his own and serving our state in the National Guard, and starting college, and then our daughter is trying to get this healthcare that she so desperately needs to survive in this. It's hard to really put a picture on those moments, and when I think back about on those conversations that my wife and I had, and we included everybody around the table, those were real hard conversations to think we've got to move one parent to another state and one parent has to stay behind. No one should have to do that, in this and not in this country, right? This is something you see on 2020 or a CNN special, right, of something that's happened in another country because someone's having to flee because someone is targeting a group for ethnic cleansing or whatever it is, right? But these were things that were happening in Alabama, and so being able to shed a light on that, I thought was really important, and we were very thankful to be included in
that. Building off of that, I'd love to open it up to everyone on the panel. Why is storytelling and art important at a time like this? We've already heard some of your take on it. You're also welcome to add in, but I'll start over on this side first. Why is storytelling and art important in this movement?
Yeah, I actually was at a lunch earlier today for a company here in Atlanta talking about advocacy and the importance of storytelling. When someone asks, how do I get started in advocacy, or what's the most important thing I can do to advocate, I always say the first thing I would recommend is to get comfortable and confident with your own story, to get clear on what is your story, practice telling it to someone. In the case of coming down to the Capitol and speaking at a hearing, get comfortable like sharing it within 2 minutes, because that's about how much time you'll usually have to do it. But it's a lot of what the folks sitting up here with me have talked about, which is that the language that is used to debate this legislation and the language in these pieces of legislation affects real people. And I always try to go back to that trans people are people, not a debate. And the stories are what helps to show that, right? These are people, we are people, not a debate topic. And when we start to talk about how families may have to be split up, or people can't get the health care they need, and you know their names, and you know about their homes, and you know their hobbies, and you know about, you know, their relationships with their friends, and all these aspects that you cover in the book, or that we share when we advocate with legislators. And it's not just legislators, it's also our neighbors. It's the people who vote on these issues. That's one of the reasons currently on Georgia Equality social media, we've been sharing the stories of trans people. We have a beautiful story on there right now of a young woman and her father who supports her. Her name is Nadia. And we want to help share those types of stories. We also have one posted right now that is a Black trans man who is a veteran, and he talks about his experience and being a military veteran. And it just shows that, you know, there's so many different life experiences, and that trans people are just, we're just people. And yeah, the storytelling, when we try to ask people to support LGBTQ, especially trans kids and trans people, hearing stories is proven to be one of the best ways to get a positive outcome and to help affect change in the change process.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. Thanks for sharing all that. Yeah, I guess the quick thing I'll just add is that I think that it's important to tell the story of like that's not related to the policy, the shitty policy, like, and I think there's an important place for people to, you know, actually just be a person who loves being on the debate team, a person who loves smoke. I don't know barbecue, but like smoking something. So like coffee beans, barbecue, all the stuff. But we talked about pork butt. I didn't know what that was. I'm a vegetarian. But no, I think there's this world where it's like, let's also lift up the story of what life should be like and could be like if it were not for this assault on people's lives and identity. Um, I I hope that in the next decade, it's it's the kind of thing where we talk about people being trans as not like related to the bathroom or healthcare or um, sports. It's like ridiculous, and it makes me it's the kind of thing where I feel like by sharing these stories, by telling a full picture of someone's life that goes beyond the headline of the news, a story passing and here's how it impacts, we can really help people start to move beyond the politics of it all and get to a place where folks are really seen as whole people, and not just a terrible policy.
I would say that storytelling is incredibly important based off of what y'all have said, as well as knowing that you need to be able to share your story. You need to hear stories in order to get out of being siloed, feeling isolation by this death by a million cuts of legislation. Also, it's a form of liberation and like queer and trans joy to connect with people by sharing yourself and having people share themselves with you, as well as leaning into the life-saving gift of art. I mean, even if you're like not a visual artist or a musical artist, art can save lives. It's the part of you that doesn't have words that you can use to express yourself. And you don't know what will come out of it, but it's usually something that's incredibly beautiful, especially if you're doing it in community. And it doesn't have to be visual and musical, like I said. It could be writing, and it could be just cooking a really delicious meal and sharing stories that way, and working on getting your stories down to 2 minutes, possibly. But also, yeah, I just really, I just believe that art is incredibly important because we need different ways to be able to archive these times so we can go and compare and know that this is not normal whatsoever. And we need to be able to find ways that we can spread ourselves a little bit further for the next day, for the next year, for the next decade, et cetera, with each other and with our imaginations towards a better future.
With art on my mind, Liz, could you tell people about the book cover design and the elements that are involved in it, as well as some of the goodies that they may have found on their seats?
I would love to, Alexis. Thank you. So, do you mind if I use this? Okay, thank you so much. Look at us connecting. This is great. Okay. So for the cover of the book, I utilized the trans. Oh, thank you. The trans pride colors, and also I have in the background the texture of a blanket because I wanted to illustrate that with trans joy, there's also comfort during these really challenging times, and that's why we have a maze in the background, because there's just so many obstacles and dead ends, but also there are ways through. And I also want to highlight within this book, it's not just very depressing stories. There's also a lot of joy in here with all the different ways that people are using their imagination to build community and also build just better experiences for youth. But that's some of the background behind this book cover. And also I have here a couple of invitations for people. We were discussing earlier in the first leg of this book tour, like people sometimes start to fidget, their minds start to wander, and I created this little activity book where we have, thanks Adam, where we have a crossword puzzle that has some reminders for why we're doing this work, why we are connecting with each other, why y'all are here, as well as how we're showing care for people in the community. We also have a maze that further illustrates some of the obstacles that people face, be it money, finding healthcare providers, travel costs. Those are just some of the elements. And on this side, we also have a little QR code that will take you to a Padlet, which is a digital platform. It's not, I make it sound like it's Instagram. It's a website where you can go and incorporate some words that are affirming for trans youth and gender expansive folks. And if you are somebody who's hesitant to use the internets these days, we also have the physical postcard here. And you can see behind us we have different folks from our book tour who have helped to expand this art installation of affirming messages and images. And I'm so glad that Alexis shared this idea of like documenting them, scanning them, and maybe one day you'll see them online that you can scroll through. So those are some of the aspects of things that I've provided in the area of art. And finally, we have this poster here that I created that's just another way of showing that even though things can be incredibly exhausting and scary, we still have each other to lean on to. And I just wanted to show a little bit of joy and beauty in that community that we have and that comfort that we provide each other. So,
aren't they amazing? They are incredible.
Thank you.
Liz has been such a delight, and I embarrass them at every single stop we go to by one, singing their praises because they are one of my favorite people. I mean, I love Adam too, but Liz is like up there. And then also, I like to say that Liz is literally the only reason why we got the book done, because we were really close to that April 15th deadline, and there were just some chit chat happening in the living room at this Airbnb where we were having a writer's retreat. And like, I think the manuscript is due the next day. And Liz is so kind. I can never get the tone right, but Liz was kind of just like, "Don't you have a book due tomorrow? Like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the book? No?
Hey guys, did you write anything lately?" It's like that.
They were talking for 5 hours about Survivor and pop culture. I said, "You're going to a Survivor birthday party tomorrow. Could y'all work on the book a little bit?" Thank you.
So we are so fortunate to have Liz on our team for so many reasons. For folks who are online, you can get access to the Padlet by going to www.transkidsourkids.org. There's a lot of information there. There's also a book club guide for folks who might be interested in hosting a book club. And you can find the Padlet there. I think it just says interactive something for trans kids. And then also, I haven't talked with Liz about any digital stuff, but you might be able to email info@southernequality.org and see if we might be able to send you any of the stuff digitally or some other way. So I don't know if we have the rights to that, but we can figure it out, or you can ask us about it and we can see what we can do. But I know not everyone is here, and so we'd love to have you have access to what we can give to you. Is there anything else that y'all would add about art or storytelling in this process?
I think one of the biggest things that helped me on my journey with storytelling was it brought so much community. Even before all of this legislation was passed, I, was still coming out as trans in middle school. And, middle school is such a, scary, divisive time for everyone involved. But I, like mentioned in the book, I was pretty severely bullied in the 6th grade to the point where my parents had to take me out of public school. And, once I got out of public school, while I wasn't getting bullied, I kind of lost a lot of my friends and a lot of the support system that was there. And I felt so alone. And so, my parents were doing everything they could to try to, make me feel like I had community and I had people that supported me out there. So we found this opportunity of a local PFLAG meeting. PFLAG is an organization, parents and friends of lesbians and gays, but it's really just a community organization. You probably have a local chapter somewhere where you live. It's for LGBTQ people, allies, really anyone who wants to meet people, to come together and have a support system. And I'll never forget our first meeting. Whenever we went in there, I was so scared. I didn't know anybody. I walked in, I was like, guys, we should turn around. I'm scared. I don't know what I'm doing. But, we started the meeting and I just felt immediately at home. I met other queer people that were sharing their stories and their experience. And I just felt so seen and so heard in that moment because I no longer felt alone. And so I think that things like this book and things like, me going out and trying to share my story, I hope other trans kids or other queer kids or anyone out there who feels alone, who feels so targeted in this moment, can realize that there's so many people out there that support you, and there are so many others out there that are going through similar things. And so I think that storytelling is also about community. It's about, finding people that have gone through similar things and being able to, express yourselves and feel comfortable and feel heard and seen. So that's the biggest thing for me.
I think for me, as I was sitting listening to all this, one of the words that kept coming to mind around another reason we really enjoy or like telling our story and going out and sharing the story is the word truth, right? Mm-hmm. So much of this, the legislation that's been passed, when you watch the way it's presented and you listen to how it's presented, if you have any experience with this in real life, you know that the entire thing is based in lies, right? The entire thing is a lie. And so every opportunity that I've had to stand up, whether in front of our state legislature, other state legislatures, in front of the, Harley and I had the opportunity to talk to the Equality Caucus in DC and speak the truth. You talk about your truth, but I think it's a bigger truth to really put, all right, this is what these people are saying this looks like, but this is not what the reality is, right? This is not what the truth is. And if we could change just, I think maybe it was Adam or someone earlier said, changing one heart, changing one mind. We may not have made the difference altogether in our state, but I know meeting individually with these different legislators and different people, and being able to share our story and share the truth, it makes a big difference, because if you don't know, you don't know, right? And you can only listen to the lies.
Thank you for that, you two. I have one more question for our panelists, and then we're going to open up for Q&A or conversation, resource sharing, whatever y'all have. So I have to admit, it's a very discouraging time right now for a lot of us for so many reasons across intersecting identities, but especially in my work in LGBTQ plus rights and justice, the organizations I work for. At the same time, so I work for like 6 organizations that work in LGBTQ plus spaces as a grant writer, and they're doing such amazing things too. And so I'm curious for y'all, what can people do today, tomorrow, next month, this year to make the world better for trans and queer youth, and to just to make the world better in a really, really hard time?
You want to start here in Georgia? Give the pitch.
All right, so this is for all my folks that are local, anyone watching that is in Georgia. This info is for you. So the first thing I would say is I'm going to share my email. I might regret that, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. It's Noel, Noel, at georgiaequality.org. If you're interested in getting involved with sharing your story, especially when it comes to the legislative level at our state capitol. If you feel inspired by our friends here, if you feel that that's something you'd like to get more involved in, we need every voice that we can. And like you mentioned, it is a scary time to put yourself out there. And it's also so important. And while it can be scary, it can also be rewarding, as you so well expressed. And so, as an invitation, if you feel compelled that you could be a person, there's actually someone who I think is watching virtually right now, who came to Georgia Equality's legislative training back in January. So we have one every January. I can also offer one to a group, like if you have a faith-based organization, if you have a book club in your neighborhood of folks who would want to get behind supporting the trans community, anything like that, I'm happy to come and present Georgia Equality's advocacy training. But we do one in January every year. And I had a mom of a trans teen come to that training. And she was nervous about coming to the Capitol. And I always remind people, the Capitol is your house. Doesn't matter who you are, what your background is, that is your house. So I want you to know that you're welcome there and you belong there. But she came to that training and she was asking me about writing letters or writing emails, if that helps. And I said, yes, it does make a difference. And when you're ready, I would love to help you go from that to making a phone call and to go from that to actually speaking to them in person. So obviously, letters and emails are a great start. And then there's also other steps that you can challenge yourself to grow towards those levels. And so she started with emails. And by the end of the legislative session, she was down at the Capitol on a weekly basis, sometimes more than once a week, showing up, being willing to testify, being willing with her child's permission to share her family story. And that is so important because, again, there are so many lies being said. And so by having you down there, it helps to counteract that. And even if you don't speak down there, you can show up wearing trans affirming t-shirts. If you're clergy, you can show up wearing LGBTQ affirming stoles or collars with your, LGBTQ pins, anything of that nature. But please, reach out to me if that's of interest. At Georgia Equality, we do often have weekly volunteer nights. We look at elections all the way down to Board of Commissioner elections. There is one in Cobb County on April 29th, which is right around the corner. I won't mention endorsed candidates here, but you can probably find them on our website. But with even local elections, people might not realize how important they are, but there are reasons that we are involved in those because Georgia is one of 5 states without statewide protections for folks. We are one of 5 states in the country without non-discrimination protections across our state. So that is one way that you can be involved, and that's something I do throughout the year. We have public service commissioner. We have all different kinds of elections that we'll be involved in at Georgia Equality, and people don't realize how much those can still impact families like ours. And then the last thing I'll say is that Georgia Equality, we are the state's oldest and largest LGBTQ advocacy org. You can support us through donations as well. And we have our Evening for Equality, which is our annual fundraiser. We're turning 30 years old on June 28th. The ticket site is up on our website. If you would like to join us, we'd love to have you. But those are some ways that you can get involved in various capacities. And please reach out to me if I can help you with anything personally.
I would just really lean into each other with community and strengthening each other through sharing stories, and also like accompanying each other to like the state house and to the polls. Also, on a immediate request, if you want to fill out this postcard and you don't have any pens with you, that's okay. There's a table in the front that has some art supplies as well as some stickers, and you can just hand it up to us and we can put them up here and for our future stops. And yeah, like I said before, like leaning into art in the various forms, I think is really important on not just on a physical level, but like, you know, just in your soul on a molecular level. You don't know what it's doing to your mind. It's amazing, actually. I'm going to be rambling for a little bit, so I'm going to stop right now. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to pick it up from you, Liz. So, of course, the politics of it all is so important. Being at the State House, being involved, sharing your story, all that stuff is important. And also, like, I think especially now in this, it feels just like, I don't know, some days you wake up and you're just like, this is a hopeless time politically. And I also think that's okay to give yourself permission to feel a little bit like, okay, today is not the day I go to the State House. Today is not the day I engage in politics, but today is the day maybe I am nice to my my neighbors, or I reach out to my my students or my colleagues or whatever, and just be that affirming voice who can say, like, you know, be someone's kind of bright spot in their day. I think that stuff can really go a long way, especially as we look down this 4 years of hell. That I think we're, you know, we can really sort of see that it's important to, you know, find that kind of joy. Obviously, a lot of what we've been talking about tonight has been pretty heavy and politicsy, but I think, as Liz said, the book is not all sad and is not all about politics and policy. The second half of the book really is about the ways that folks are exploring community, creating safe spaces for folks, whether that's in a community center or at a queer prom or at like a Dungeons and Dragons night. So there's so much friendly things that people can do that I think really go a long way. I think it can be it's actually healthy to not think about the politics of it all so much, and you can really go a little crazy if that's all you're doing. And so finding those safe spaces and those pockets of community and figuring out ways to either support them or volunteer at the queer prom or have your own or start a book club or just attend something fun or affirming can kind of fill you up in a way that allows you then to go do the political thing if that's your vibe. So I think all of that's important.
Thanks, Adam. Jeff and Harley, what can folks do?
So I like to kind of echo that sentiment. It doesn't have to be, you know, it's very intimidating to get super involved in not only politics, but just, you know, putting yourself out there or putting others, you know, out there. And so I think that advocacy and getting involved can be so simple. You can say, hey, you know, I went to this, you know, book event today and I heard these incredible stories and heard some ways to get involved. You should read this book, or this is a few things I've learned from this. Or you can, you know, like I'm repping this pin today that is a transgender flag pin that at my high school, our GSA, which stands for Gender Sexuality Alliance, it's a club at our high school. Every Transgender Day of Visibility, we pass out these pins, totally optional, and it's just for students to say, you know, I support trans people. And you know, if I'm passing someone in the hallway and I see that they're repping one of our pins, I just like can't help but smile. It makes me feel so loved in our community, and so it can be something as silent and simple as that. And so I think that it's about those things, and it's also about getting involved in your community. Like I said, I'm very involved in PFLAG and the Human Rights Campaign. Whether you want to post something on your Instagram that's, hey, there's this really cool protest happening today, or hey, there's game night at our local coffee shop today. You know, just getting the word out, and that's how I was able to find community. And so I think simple things or bigger things can really make a difference. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think having an open mind too is really important. Showing support and love for others. That's I will say that's something over the past, I don't know, while we've been on this journey, I've learned a lot, how to do that maybe different, be more empathetic to others, and grown personally. And so being open to that, and being as involved in youth and the LGBT community as I've been able to be, gosh, and just watching them grow and flourish just into the little humans that they're becoming, it gives me hope for the future. You know, one of the things I did with Harley's GSA last year is I came in and we all wrote letters to all the kids in the GSA wrote letters around some of the legislation that was being done. And I took all their letters and we physically mailed them. You know, that was intimidating for high school kids. Think about it. This is high school kids, right? And they're handwriting, by the way, letters to their legislators to say, hey, these bills that you're proposing, they impact me, right? I had the opportunity to sit in a roundtable discussion with our two local legislators later that summer, and I challenged them because I know that 35 letters went to them on, did you get these letters? One, I know you did, and two, what did you think of these, right? And I will say at least one of them said, you know what? I opened those and I was really surprised to get these letters from these kids. So just supporting and lifting them up, I think, is really important. And it has been really heavy, but you know, you give your kind of self a minute to, holy crap, today was rough, right? And then you know, you find the joy in life. You know, we don't in our house, we don't circle around this all day, right? We got other stuff to do. We got graduations to plan and parties to do. So, you know, these families, all families, they have other things and other happiness. And when you can have a minute to add to that, believe me, it goes a long way.
I have one more thing to say.
Yeah, go for it, Liz.
I just want to also highlight that this is an intersectional issue and that it's connected to such a long lineage of a revolution towards liberation. So support your local bookstores and your libraries, learn your history, and also when you're feeling like you're in a dead end, try to find the other ways that people have led revolutions. And the civil rights movement is a fantastic place to start. So don't lose hope. All in all, I think that's the most important thing. Don't lose hope and connect with each other.
Amazing. On that note, I would love to just make one pitch about this book and then open it up for Q&A. The royalties for the book go towards Campaign for Southern Equality and our work with trans youth. So any book that you buy or buy for a friend or buy for your book club will automatically benefit trans youth and their families across the South and across the United States, because our work with trans youth has extended across the United States now. So that is one way to give back. Yeah, so I'd love to open up the floor for questions. We will have a mic come to you if you're in the audience so that the virtual folks can hear, and we will have some virtual questions provided to us if they come. So who would like to start?
I'll just let you know that Andrew asked a question about, you know, what is keeping you hopeful, but I think y'all kind of attended to that in the last one, so I don't want to ignore you, Andrew, online, but I think y'all did a lovely job on that last question answering that. So anybody else want to ask a question? Y'all done such a beautiful job. But yeah.
Hi. Will there be like an audio book made as well?
That's a really great question. We are in conversation right now about how that might work. We missed the initial window at the original publication date, in part because it was such a fast turnaround that we weren't able to get the galleys to audiobook publishers in time. But we are in conversation right now about how we can make that happen, because it's important to us to be able to have the book be accessible. And I almost only listen to audiobooks these days. So although I have just bought like 5 books here, so I'm getting back into my print phase, my print era. So yeah, thank you for asking that.
We love our friends at Libro.fm. So just a little plug for them, the indie audiobook folks, not owned by the devil. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Revea. I work in education, and you gave us a lot of great ideas about how we as individuals can do the work of supporting trans youth. And I'm just curious, just hearing about your experience and the stories you've collected from other folks around the country, like what, as individuals working in one of the battlegrounds of where this legislation is being targeted, can we do to create spaces of inclusion for trans youth?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you so much for all your work. The biggest thing that we've been hearing from like folks in schools right now is that it's hard. It's already hard. It's always been hard, and it's even harder given all these laws. And I guess the thing I would encourage is like this. I'm not saying you're doing this. I'm not saying anyone's doing this, but it's something I've heard folks sort of express anxieties and worries about is don't kind of do their like dirty work for them. So I understand needing to follow a law or feeling like that, but there also is a lot of intimidation that goes into that. And if you really look at the laws, they often, if I'm talking about these like don't say LGBT laws and all that kind of stuff, they often are pretty narrow. Actually, like the challenges of it, or the consequences of them are really of folks kind of over complying, feeling intimidated, feeling like they can't do something like we were seeing things about, and I know this is the case in Alabama, that there actually is a law that would do this, but taking down pride flags, taking down safe space signs. If it doesn't require you to do it, don't do it. Or feel emboldened by, talking to other teachers and figuring out what you specifically are required to do and what you are not. I don't think anywhere in the country is there a law that says that you can't be kind and affirming to a trans kid and like let them know that that you see them and you support them. That is not illegal. So I guess small things like that I think can go a long way when kids are reading these headlines and seeing these policies that are pretty vaguely written, kind of like not even very good laws, like they're not airtight. I think a lot of the pain from those laws can come from people feeling kind of trapped in a corner. So that's somewhere to start. Do you have more?
Yeah, I think what Adam's speaking to is don't comply in advance. And that takes some bravery and some courage. Here in Georgia, which I assume you're local, there is currently no Don't Say Gay bill. They did attempt to introduce one this past session, but Georgia Equality was working hard on that along with other partner activists and advocates. So I just want to encourage teachers, to look for the ways, like just to be kind and affirming, even if it's just simple conversations or being creative in things you put in your classroom or in ways that you address your students to let them know that you are an ally, that you are a supporter, that you are someone they can trust, that you are someone that can provide empathy. So one thing that I've talked a lot about with my friends and other trans people here is just to remember that an executive order is not a law. And that doesn't mean that sometimes there's not aspects of it that affect us immediately. But when it comes to commands, it's not a law. And so remembering that sometimes depends on the day. But if I'm in a moment where I can kind of really ground myself in that, it lowers my anxiety and helps me feel more confident to be that affirming voice. And speaking of things teachers can do, we really need more folks involved in our school systems and teachers to be willing to put their voice out there publicly. And I know not everyone is in a place where they can do that, but if you are, it's very needed. Same with medical providers. We are seeing fewer medical professionals feel comfortable doing that. And so we're always looking for folks who are in a certain phase of their journey where it's more possible for them to do that.
So, I'm currently a senior in high school, and I've kind of seen the direct effects of this in education. And without kind of being redundant, I think that the biggest thing is to not be complicit with these laws and legislation, to kind of, if you're able to, of course, it's a big thing to do, but kind of stand your ground and, say, I'm not going to, make my classroom not a safe space. I kind of want to highlight a story from my high school from a few years ago before any of these laws were passed. My debate teacher, who I love dearly, she has a pride flag up in her classroom, and a whole bunch of students tried to sign a petition to get it down. And the school emailed asking her to take it down. And she said, I'm not going to take it down unless like somebody like actually rips it off my wall for me, or I'm going to call the local news station. I'm going to tell them exactly what you're trying to do here. And so I think that being able to stand up to hate, stand up to bullying by these lawmakers or by any administrator that's telling you need to do something that, of course, you don't have to break the law, but doing anything you can to, stand up for trans youth, for queer people, for anyone really, I think it's huge.
Yeah, I think to echo that, as a parent, as a father, I challenged. Alabama's a little different than Georgia and the way our schools, but I went to our board of education and challenged them to stand up to the legislators and stand up to the things. They're writing some of these laws that affect you as educators, and they're writing them in these vague ways to scare and bully. And I just, especially in the state of Alabama, the way education is structured. First off, the teachers union in Alabama is very strong. I'm not sure how strong it is here in Georgia because it's been a very long time since I was over here. But you start getting the teachers union to stand back up to it. You get educators to stand up to your local legislators. And the thing that legislators react to more than anything is when they think they're going to lose their job, which happens every election cycle, right? If you start getting the buzz out that, you know what, I'm really sick of you writing these laws that are targeting me and my students, it will stop. It will stop. When they feel their job is in jeopardy, it will stop. So I'm getting all red probably. I get real fired up about it because it affects my daughter. But I definitely challenged our board of directors, our school superintendent, city council. And again, I know not everybody can do that, but you start getting together small groups. Like everybody said, you can't break the law and you got to save your job. And I do get that. But those larger union organizations that have those voices, that you can be a little more kind of independent and not a specific teacher, I think that would make a big difference.
We have
I was waiting for the next question.
Yep, we have an online question, and this is a question we get a lot from our parent advocates and also from adult trans people who are trying to think about their role in this climate, which is just basically, are you scared about being an advocate in public right now? And how do you navigate that? Are you taking different precautions? Like, do you have any practical kind of ideas about, all right, what are you doing differently now than maybe you weren't doing 6 months ago? Or maybe it's all the same.
Like I said earlier, I think that the landscape is so much different now than it was a year ago than it was 5 years ago, and things are changing so rapidly, especially we were talking about earlier, we got some food and we were talking about how, having federal protection from, a sympathetic White House and US Congress was really helpful to kind of, have, your state lawmakers are attacking you, but you have that blanket that is like, okay, at least the federal government, is there to support me. And now that that's gone, there's really, you kind of feel hopeless and like there's nothing. And, I felt kind of more unsafe and definitely noticed a difference the past few months and just in general since this rhetoric has happened. And so I think that it's important to get out there and share your stories and do whatever you can, but to also be safe. We need people to be able to continue sharing their stories. And so this kind of goes out to people who also aren't advocates. Protect those people that are sharing their stories, provide safe spaces for them, whether that's, a community event where, you invite those people to come in case there's danger, or, protecting your kids at home or protecting your friends, protect those people because they're really important in this time. And this goes to issues other than trans people. There's been a rise in deportations and things like that. And so it's a really, really scary environment right now. And so, for people who are advocating, I say always stay safe, because we need to hear your stories. We need to hear your voices. And also for people who aren't advocating, be able to provide that safe space.
This is such a great question. I just want to honor the fact that it was asked. It's a really important question for these times. And in the past few months, I was sharing with this group earlier, I received threats to my email. My personal social media has been tweeted about. I mean, the concerns are very valid. And also for me, I feel like Liz mentioned, we come from a rich history of folks that have always fought and have always, we have, our transcestors, as we refer to, people like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. And I really lean into them. It is very draining to do this 24/7. Well, not 24/7, because I do make time for downtime, and I've probably been taking a little extra downtime in the last few months. But it's so necessary that we find our personal why and what our comfort and our boundaries are, but connecting to the people who have come before us to act up. And I'll show you, for people that are here, I actually had this tattoo. And Andrew, if you're still watching online, you asked about things that are giving us joy or hope. I got this tattoo of the ACT UP triangle. My partner, who's here in the audience, is a beautiful Black trans woman and tattoo artist. And so we in our household, we live a life where it's not just the activism and advocacy that we do, it is our identities. And so even when we are doing other things, I think there is, in all honesty, I'm carrying a part of what is going on. It's just, there's no way to separate it. Like, we're all whole people. And yes, we can take time away from activism and advocacy, but it's so important that we balance our rest with also finding ways to stay strong, because it is scary. It is scary. But thinking about, Marsha and Sylvia and the whole ACT UP crew and all of that, and then interacting with all the people up here. But I've started, if you are in activism and advocacy, a couple of practical tips I'll share real quick is, number one, if you have an event, require people to get vetted before you share the location of it. Especially if you're not a business, if it's something you're doing, if you're a nonprofit, if you're just a group of folks that are getting together for a meetup or something, consider, can you vet people before you just share the location? That's something that I've been doing a little bit differently lately on certain things. There's also groups like Common Defense, which is progressive veterans who are supportive of trans folks, who you could tap into people like that. So like when we had our legislative advocacy training back in January, it was at a local church. And I actually had some military vets in the audience in plain clothes, out of wanting to make sure our folks are protected. So I think the way that we think about how to keep each other safe, because we keep each other safe, it's not the system. So really thinking about that and knowing that you have your community protections in place helps me feel strong enough to get through this time, and also getting new tattoos when I can too.
Jennifer, are you going to add something to that?
Yeah, I'll say, kind of like what Harley said. So if you had asked me this question a year and a half ago, I'm a man born and raised in the South. I really didn't think about it very much, right? And we've been doing advocacy now for, I don't know, she was a lot smaller when we started this. I will say in the last few months, though, for me personally, right, it's been different. I have had trouble sleeping. I've been extremely afraid. It's affected me personally in a way that it hadn't before, and it's taken me several months. It's now the end of April, and I'm kind of just getting into a place where I've kind of let some stuff go and realized the world didn't end, but it was hard. So definitely take care of your safety. Think about your safety. With an event that Harley had at school, I was sharing with everybody earlier that something happened right after she left for school, and I don't know why, but things always happen like that. Like she's just walked out of the door 5 minutes earlier. I'm thankful for cell phones now, because I was able to pick up the phone and call her and say, "Look, anybody approaches you at school today that you don't know, you get away from there very, very quickly." She'll tell you a year ago she would never heard things like that come out of my mouth. So just being aware of your situation, having that kind of your head on the swivel, and taking care of each other. I think that's absolutely one of the most important things. You know who's in your community, you know who you are, and just looking out for each other. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, base human nature we ought to do anyway. But
the only quick thing I'd also add to that is for folks who might be, well, so you don't have to always use your name. You can, for certain things, you can use pseudonyms. There are several people in our book who use pseudonyms in order to protect the identity of themselves or their children. So you can think about what level of safety and what level of openness you want to have. And also I recommend doing things like attending an anti-doxing webinar or something like that. I went to one before our book came out to make sure some of my personal information was pulled from like white pages and wasn't available anymore. And there are many places your information is that you wouldn't even imagine. And so I recommend thinking about some of those safety precautions, and Delete Me, doing some education, self-education, or with your PFLAG or groups in order to keep your personal information as safe as possible.
One thing that we have really noticed in our groups here is just that one of the very powerful things was the mental health aspect and the shame that was used to control us for so long. And one of the beautiful things about your generation, Harley, is that y'all just don't have that shame, and I think if people are not made to feel shame about who they are, which there obviously is no reason we should be ashamed of who we are, we're harder to control, and I think that's the thing, and that's a beautiful weapon that we have to fight back against some of this stuff. Is like, for so long a lot of queer and trans people were, we could be blackmailed, we could be hurt in all these different ways. In fact, that's, the executive order around the military service is based on that very old stereotype of queer and trans people as being inherently deceitful. And it's like, well, ironically, we were deceitful because y'all were assholes, right? It's like we had to hide, and that's not coming organically from within, right? That's not us. That was protection. And now that we know that we are perfect as we are, and we don't have to pretend to be anything other than who we are, it's just so much harder for us to internalize that BS from those laws. The language, it's like you look at that language and those laws and you're just like, oh, this is terrible, and you're dumb, and like you don't understand biology, and like all of these things. And I think having that sort of attitude of, I'm okay, this is awful, but I know I'm okay, and my family and my friends and my community knows I'm okay. I just think that's seeing that shift in my lifetime has been huge, and I'm so grateful for that. And I think that's the importance of cultural work, and that's the importance of political organizing. That's the importance of books, like having ways that we can share information so that more and more people know we're okay, and no matter what happens at a legislative level, we're going to continue to be okay. So thank you all so much for your work. Thank you to everyone who is here tonight, and thank you to everyone watching online. If you're watching online and you want to buy the book, please click this teal button at the bottom center of the screen. We really appreciate you doing that and buying the book from us tonight. You can also always buy the book from their website, but all the money will go to support.
Yeah, definitely buy the book from this website, from the
for tonight. For tonight.
We love Charis.
And for the folks who are physically in the room, you can buy the book up front and get it signed by these great folks. You can also ask more questions, make art, do all the things. And we would love, if this is your first time at Charis for some reason, to pick up our flyer and come to more of our events. Tomorrow is Independent Bookstore Day, so we're going to have a great fun time, including a middle grade author, a trans middle grade author. So middle grade books are like for 10 to like 13-year-olds. So if you have any of those ages in your life, it's a really wonderful trans book that focuses on disability and joy. So come on out for that. Let's give one more round of applause. Yeah.